Hi, it's Chris Titley here. On today's episode of Scoreboard, I'm joined by Chris Bond. Chris is the captain of the Steelers, the Australian wheelchair rugby team. Chris, thank you so much for being part of this series.
Absolutely, Chris. It's a pleasure to be on board.
Chris B and Chris T. It's the first ever Chris, so congratulations. What a cool name that is. Chris, I'm just interested in hearing about the start of 2025. We're sitting here on the 19th of February of 2025. How's the start of the year been for you?
Yeah, it's been pretty good. My mates actually call me Bondi. If there's
okay, we might go Bondi. We'll be a mate straight up. Yeah,
if that helps you, Chris. 2025. It's been good. It's been a bit of a slow start, which usually happens after the big peak of the Paralympics. So that come down year. In terms of sport, we've had a competition already. We've been away to Japan last week with the team, and it's a very new look team at the moment, which again happens in this stage of the cycle. There's some development players that got their opportunity to put the green and gold on, and we've got some athletes from our Paralympic campaign that are taking a bit of a break. But no, all systems go, mate. We're well into training and gearing up for our next big international, which is in June.
Right, where's that?
That's in Australia, actually. We've got one back on home soil. So for the first time, we'll have international wheelchair rugby in Adelaide in South Australia.
That is amazing. Adelaide just seems to be popping up everywhere from the golf to the World Championships of volleyball. We had a volleyballer on recently at the end of the year, the volleyball event on. So fantastic, mate. So I'm going to touch on 2024 because you briefly mentioned the Olympics the Paralympics in Paris, how that was for you guys, the experience just going through and it's not your first Olympic Games, and we'll touch on those Olympic Games previous to that, but certainly let's talk about Paris.
Yeah, Paris Paralympic Games, what a spectacle. For the first time, Channel 9 had the rights to it, so everyone back home was really getting on board and had as much access as they've ever had towards the games, and that was obviously the warm-up event. The Olympic Games would have got everyone a bit excited, and then the Paralympic Games came along and they could follow our athletes. For me, that was my first Paralympic Games as captain of the Australian Steelers as well. So very proud achievement for me. That was my fourth Paralympic Games. So definitely not a rookie anymore, one of the oldest guys in the team. And I see it in a few different ways in terms of result of how we did over there. So we could have come into the tournament having won the World Championship in 2022 and then winning the World Cup Challenge in 2023. So we had a very good team, a very strong team, and probably, I've said it on record, probably the strongest team we've ever had in my whole career. But in the same token, the rest of the world is, well and truly caught up since I first started playing, and there's some very, very good athletes out there in our sport and very well-run programs and teams out there now. So like most sport at the elite level, it's just who's better on the day, who gets luck of the call, who puts in that extra effort. And all in all, it started off pretty slowly for us. We went in and unfortunately we lost our first game. So you're already on the back burner.
To Team GB, was it?
Against Great Britain, who we didn't underestimate by any means, but they match us quite well in terms of their lineups and our lineups, and just made a few errors at the wrong time, and that's what killed us in the end. And we clawed it back a little bit, but we lost to them by 3, and then kind of sat back and we're like, geez, we got France next in Paris, and they're an up-and-coming team, the European champions. They're ranked 4th in the world at the moment, so it was going to be no easy battle, but that's why we do it. We're athletes, and this is the pinnacle. This is why we're here. So we still wanted to go and put a showing on and show that we can play this sport, and we think we're one of the best teams in the world. And we actually went in as the number 1 world-ranked team. And, yeah, that second night against Paris, things just started to click a bit more. We got up by about 4 tries in the first quarter and just kind of held that lead. And the crowd was immense. Like, it's not the biggest stadium there. I think it was around 10,000 or something, but just was purpose-built as everyone was all around you, like a big square, and you had to really sort of squint to find any green and gold in that crowd that night. It was just blue, white, and red, and they're singing songs and booing us when we're sort of pulling out a goal and hitting their players over and stuff like that. So it was awesome, like, as an athlete, as an experience, and we did get the win. And personally, I was lucky enough to score the winning match-winning try in some spectacular fashion on the buzzer, and we kind of needed that goal margin to help us out to cross over. So everything kind of went wrong day one, and then day two it went right for us. Then we kind of licked our wounds and had a look at our third opponent, which was Denmark, who in Tokyo Paralympics actually beat us in the first game out of the blue. Like, they're one of the lowest ranked teams, and I'd never even lost a Paralympic Games game before Denmark beat us in Tokyo. So we had to get them back. They can't go along saying we've got you 2 Paralympic Games, we've beaten you again, and we had to win anyway to cross over. And we started to build our momentum, and we did beat Denmark by about 3 or 4 again. And then we sat back in the village, sort of biting our nails, and we're waiting on results of the other pool, which is a bit daunting. And luckily, in the village, you got the whole Australian Paralympic team, the mob around you. So all in the foyer, they got on the TV, all the different sports, all the different athletes. Like, what are we doing? Why are we watching a non-Australian game? They're like, we need GB to beat France.
You're cheering on the team that that beat you, right?
That just beat us, and we would eventually play in the bronze medal match. Yep. But that's sport, that's the way it rolls sometimes. And it was kind of cool to see the whole Australian team there, cheering the red and white bombs, which is you would never ever do, right? But anyway, they got the job done, luckily, and that meant we progressed. And then we had a semi-final against Japan, who they were the number one in the world. They beat us to the world champs in 18. They beat us in our zonal championship, so we had to go through the long way to even get to Paris. And they're just a solid team. They got players in classifications that are top of their function, top of their class across the board. They're just ridiculous, and they kind of based their game off us over the last 10 years or so. So played quite a similar style, but they're extremely good, and they went through on every game in their pool up to that stage. And but they're our rivals essentially. They're kind of one of the closest in our zone that's at our level. And we went out there and it was head to head, goal for goal. And we actually got up by about 2-3 goals at one stage, and coming into that closing fourth quarter, which still gives me nightmares, still gives my teammates nightmares. And it's one of those things in sport where it came down to we had under 40 seconds left, which is in our sport the amount of time you've got to score your try. We had the ball, and it was even. So no, it wasn't even. So we were up by 1. We had the ball. We went down, and instead of scoring a try to go 2 up, we got notified by the coaching staff they wanted to pull it out, use our timeout, and score last. So we did that, use the timeout, which actually meant that the other team then can set up their defensive play. And all we really need to get was to get the ball in, essentially. And of course, that's what happened. High pressure moment, semi-final, go to the gold medal match, trying to get the ball in, got it in, made a mistake. They got the ball, and it went to overtime. So we had it in the bag, essentially. And we stood our lollies, and it went to overtime. And in overtime, they're cheering. They just come off a win. They were no chance. They were losing. All of a sudden, they got a chance. And we kind of had it in the bag, lost it. Our heads kind of dropped. And we're like, I could have won that. Now I have to go to overtime. It's just a bit of a difference in mentality. But we try to get ourselves together. We're exhausted. This is a semi-final. You're playing 4 quarters is enough. We're going to overtime now and against one of the world's best teams, and put it in there, lost the tip. They scored first, and then we just made a mistake, and that's it. We lost to them, I think, by 1 in the end, which is daunting. That's the game, the semi-final. You win that, you guarantee a medal. If you don't, you're fighting for a medal. It's such a different headspace, and I always tell my team, this is the game. Like, the semi-final is the game to win. So yeah, unfortunately, they got us there, and the camp was pretty sad inside. This is the best team we've ever had, and all we can do now is fight for bronze against a team that's already beaten us. But that's sport, and what do we have to do? We have to put that all behind us and try and rally the troops again. Less than 24 hours to fight and come away with something. So we did. We didn't sleep that much that night, to be honest. Just everything going through our head. But we got together as a team the next morning, kept it fairly light, and then went out and just reminded ourselves that, I think 2/3 of our team actually had never represented Australia at wheelchair rugby at a Paralympic Games before. So we had a very strong core who'd been there for a while. But around that core, we had some newer athletes within that 4-year cycle. So those guys are now Paralympians, but they weren't Paralympic medalists, and that's pretty special. We've come all this way, and you look up and you got your mum, your best friends, your wives, girlfriends in the crowd, kids for some athletes. You're like, well, we're gonna do our best here. This is it, last chance, one game. That's it. We can rest for a few months, and luckily enough, we went hard, and it was about even throughout the game, and we started to pull away and made a couple of plays towards the end, and with that relief of actually getting a bronze medal was pretty special, given that we're in a similar circumstance in that last quarter where we're up by 1 or 2, had the ball, but if we turned it over, they could come back, and we just gave everything we could in that last quarter. Didn't want to repeat it, and came over the win. And it was the feeling of elation was quite the same of winning a gold medal. I've done that before too. Of you've won a medal, you haven't lost anything, and you get the crowd up. You've got the Australian flag you're carrying around. You're jumping around your teammates, and just between utter exhaustion and relief that you've come away with something, and doing it with this team that you've been at war with for the last 4 years and really come together as a group is something very special.
Sport comes down to moments, and the athletes that I've interviewed before about giving everything their best shot, and then the actual, I suppose, the result of the game comes down to something which, in essence, sometimes is luck, and maybe sometimes it's skill, or whatever it might be, but giving everything your best shot, and then obviously the pure emotion of being on the wrong side of the ledger to pick yourself up and go again to get something in your hand is incredible. So congratulations on that, and obviously you've achieved gold before in previous Paralympic Games, but the team itself. How did you feel after getting that bronze, being on the podium, and then coming back and showing that medal off, and being proud of that moment?
Yeah, it's not often you really get to reflect on your successes in sport, in particular our sport, because you just always got something you're aiming towards, and this is our big dance. So it hurt being at that gold medal match because we had to be there to then be on the podium after, right? So we're sitting there, and these other teams, which, we just lost in overtime to one, and the other one most likely would have beaten them in the semi and probably won gold. Like, it hurts sitting there watching that, but then I don't know, you kind of do realize when you get up on that podium and all your friends there just cheering you on, and that is sport. Sometimes, as you said, the result is sometimes dictated by things that are out of your control, or just someone who's as good as you, which it should be at that level, who played a little bit better. So it was still a big relief. I think coming home, I was a bit disappointed. First time captaining a team, had won gold previous games, and thinking that's your vision, that's what you always want, right? It's the only goal. But then coming back, and I don't know, there was a renewed sense of the public knew about Paralympians now. Like, I come back and they kind of known about us before, but there was more exposure. The movement's come forward in more leaps and bounds in previous games, and I'd be feeling pretty off about it. I'd come home, go for a walk down the beach where I live in the Sunshine Coast with my partner in the morning, and usually get people staring at you. I wear cross-legged legs when I walk, so people staring at you, or in previous it'd be like, "Oh, do you play sport?" kind of thing. Whereas I get people stopping me saying, "Oh, well done on your bronze medal, Chris. You know my name, you know what we did." I got a guy who pulled me over and said, "Oh, shame about that turnover in the fourth quarter against Japan. You guys had it in the bag." I'm like, wow, you guys have watched our sport and you've taken it in and adopted it and got behind us. And that, to me, as an athlete with a disability, is something I've always dreamed of. I've always wanted to be an athlete. I didn't know it'd be in the Paralympics. So I acquired my disability at 19. But that childhood dream of representing Australia and people knowing who you are and following you and cheering you on was so much more relevant coming home. And then it made me a bit more proud of, we actually did win a medal for our country. And just thinking about everyone in their living rooms, like I did during the Olympics, fist pumping and backing us in. And I don't know, that makes me happy as an athlete.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's get more following for wheelchair rugby as well. Do you want to talk about the game itself, how it's progressed, a little bit about the rules, etc. And I suppose that, Australia's dominance over so long, and now you're captain and you're an advocate for the sport. Let's give the sport a plug.
Yeah, absolutely. So the sport was invented in the 1970s in Canada. There was a bunch of guys in rehab, quadriplegic athletes who weren't functional enough to play the sports like basketball and that, where you got sort of less impairment, so use of all your hands, that kind of thing. They want to create a sport. So they got some wheelchairs and a couple of rubbish bins and just started smashing into each other, trying to get this whatever ball made of wrapped up paper or something into the rubbish bin. And that's this kind of origin story. And, Canadians are a bit like us. They love full contact sport, ice hockey, gridiron. And our sport is a mix of a lot of North American sports, soccer, basketball. But I think why Australians are so good at it is because we've got our own, rugby league, AFL, team sport culture and contact sport culture. The big point of difference for our sport is that it's actually a mixed sport. So male and female athletes compete in the same sport, the same discipline. And when that whistle blows, if the girl's got the ball, you're going to hit them as hard as you can, which is a weird thing for me to step into from, my history in able-bodied contact sport, but a great dynamic to have, I think. And it's really helped us shape our culture and our values as a team, understanding that both from a men's and a woman's perspective. And women in our sport get so in our sport, we've got a classification system as to where you can fit into a team. So we've got 4 athletes on court, and we've got a classification system at its highest is 3.5 points, which is myself, which is deemed the most functional. So I've got all my core muscles. I'm a quadruple amputee, so I'm missing my left hand, most of my right fingers, and my legs below my knee. And then that classification system goes from 3.5 and 3, 2.5, 2, 1.5, to 0.5, which are the most impaired. So the 0.5 athletes are kind of high-level quadriplegic athletes, no use of their body, say nipples down, not much use of their arms, maybe no pec, tricep, that kind of thing. And within those 4 athletes, we need to make up at least 8 points, 8 or less points on court. So you think about that, I'm 3.5. I'm almost half the team myself. So our traditional lineup of myself and Riley Batt is one of the greatest rugby players that ever lived. We make up 7 points out of 8. So to get to 4, we need 2.5 players generally to assist us in that lineup. And that's what's got a high-low lineup. But you could also have a whole...
Because you've got too high, too low, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Or you could have a balanced lineup, so 4 2-point players equals 8, and everything in between, which is a coach's nightmare sometimes, trying to get that in their head what lineups they want to use. And as females, they actually get a 1 point compensation above their class as well, so to get them more included. So effectively, let's say a 3.5 Chris, if I was a female, essentially I kind of play as a 2.5 player. Yeah, and it's a game where it's quick and fast. There's a tip-off, and then a team's got 12 seconds to get over the half court, played on a basketball court, and 40 seconds to score. So it's a high scoring
So it's the shot clock with basketball combined with getting over the try line, right?
Absolutely. Yep. And you've only got 8 seconds to get the ball in from the inbounds, 8 seconds to bounce or pass. So it's very fast-paced, full contact.
High octane. Yeah.
High octane. And I think that's why the spectators love it. They're kind of challenged. A lot of people are brought up thinking the stereotype of someone in a wheelchair is soft, fragile, lesser than, non-athletic. And then they come to a game and we're fanging down the court, over 30 kilometers an hour, some of us. They've done studies where our hits have been like 5 G-forces. There's a lot of power. We train a lot, so a lot of strength and power that can come from our high pointers, smashing people, rolling them down the court, and then they're just smiling, get up and playing on. They're like, wow, this is intense for one. And if you can imagine, we play in armoured wheelchairs essentially, so wheelchairs up to 15, 20 kilos in weight, titanium, aluminium, battle machines essentially. So You get two of those colliding at a fast pace indoors, that reverberates around the stadium, big noises. You got tyres bursting from contact, just like gunshots going off. There's all sorts of weird metallic noises and screaming and that. And it's just intense, and the crowd loves that. And then they see a couple of big hits and all that, and then they kind of get in, and then they sit and they watch the tactical side of our sport. Because as I said, there's different roles that different classified players will play, different game plans, different offenses, defenses, and they sit back and like, oh wow, this is actually quite tactical and strategic, and full on, and they just kind of fall in love with our sport. So I'll recommend anyone who hasn't seen wheelchair rugby, if you get a chance to watch it live, please go and watch it live. If you can't, you can follow the Australian Steelers on their Facebook page or web page, and they've got live stream links when we're away. Or at a bare minimum, every 4 years when the Paralympic Games is on, tune in and watch Australian Steelers.
Yeah, absolutely. And the point scoring and you mentioned in quarters as well.
Oh, absolutely. So we've got 4 quarters, and every try you score is 1 point.
Yep.
We used to have timeouts. That's actually been scrapped as of this year. It's a new rule. So, which I kind of like timeout. We had in-play timeouts. So I'm about to get hit out or something. I just put timeouts to the ref, and you get 4 of those a game. To me, they're a bit of a cop-out. I don't know. Like growing up in Australia, we didn't have any of that. That's a very American rule, right?
Basketball, they do when the player gets cornered by someone about to lose the ball. They go timeout, and then they can use the timeout. But it's sort of like a mercy rule.
Absolutely, and the crowd hates it because it just makes the games longer. And that was now the new rules started this year, no timeout, so it's even quicker. There's more turnovers. There's miracle plays because you got no ace. Obviously, you just have to get that ball around the back or over the top or flick it in and just see what happens. And I think the crowd really likes that too.
Chris, to know where the future of the sport is heading, we also need to talk about the past. Your involvement in the sport, how that came about, and do you want to talk about what happened when you were 19 to lead to where you are now and on this podcast and all the attention and fame that you're getting now, which is fabulous?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I grew up in Canberra, one of the small suburbs in South Canberra, and my childhood was very athletic. We're outdoors all the time. We walked to school, rode to school. We had indoor soccer before school. Recess, we'd do soccer or handball. Lunchtime, we'd be playing, footy on the oval. And then after school, I'd be doing training for my club team. It was just, that was life. And then if we weren't, we're up the back, building bike jumps on the hill and getting around. And that's kind of how I grew up. So I was very athletic, and I guess I found probably at high school that I was pretty good at sport. I'm very stubborn. I don't know if I'm not genetically gifted, I wouldn't say. I'm just probably the mindset. I hate losing, and I'll go further than a lot of my peers. So I kind of figured that out in high school. I was very fit. I was a good athlete, and that kind of built my dream that I wanted to play sport for Australia. I didn't know what sport at that time. I was doing a lot of different things. I was good at a lot of different sports. Played rugby league for about 7 years. Cricket, basketball, soccer, you name it. And then fast forward a little bit, went to college, year 12. I was in the talent identification program for cycling. So AIS did a bit of a talent search at school and said I'd be a good athlete, and they said maybe cycling. I tried that for a bit. Didn't love it. Like growing up in Canberra, 5 a.m. mornings, you got layers on layers, pushing as hard as you can go for 30 Ks and before school, and then you got school. It was a lot. But I did enjoy that sort of step into elite sport or professional life as an athlete and doing all the right things, training, eating, learning a bit more about that. And then I finished year 12 and I was just working in a kitchen. I was a cook at the time and just starting to feel a bit off, a bit sick, and I wasn't hungry one night at work. I was like, that's not me. I'm 19 years old and this fit, athletic guy. And my boss said go home, so I did. And on the way home, I was clenching up my stomach. I was getting stabbing pains and didn't know what was going on. But being 19 and invincible,
so you cut in the background, is it?
Invincible. I didn't tell anyone and just sort of toughed it out. And then I was on the toilet all night, diarrhea, stabbing pains, curled over on the floor, and got up in the morning and everyone left for work and we got home, and again, thought I was too tough and didn't tell anyone, and it'll pass, it'll pass. It just got worse and worse, to the point where that afternoon I rang mum and said, "Oh, I'm no good here. I think I need to go to the doctor. I need someone to take me. I can't drive. I'm in all sorts." And one of my parents took me to the doctors, and the GP just said, "Oh, you probably got appendicitis. You need to go to the hospital right now." And like, I had a bucket, I was throwing up and curled up, and then got to Canberra Hospital, and I was just completely out of it. And they rushed me in, and it's a bit blurry by then, but they did a few tests and essentially said, "Mate, you're not good at all. We've got to take you in for some surgery. We don't know your chances to survive this, so say goodbye to your family." It was that quick. And I'm going, I've never been in a hospital before. Maybe a broken wrist, climbing out of a tree when I was younger. That was it. Yeah, they said, say goodbye to your family. So I rang my best mate and said, "I know what's going on here, but, thanks for being with me so long." And my brother came in, my 7-year-old sister, and then it kind of, I had to go in. Like, I was in all sorts. So my mum had just got to the hospital and she was kind of walking in. I just saw her as they're kind of wheeling me out to the surgery room. Just said, "Oh, I'll see you. I'll see you when I get up." And I woke up 4 or 5 days later in ICU, and my body was swollen. It was purple. I had tubes down my throat breathing for me, machines beeping that were keeping me alive, and just kind of going, what the hell has happened to me? I'm fit 19, and now I'm lying here and I can't move. I'm in pain. And eventually the doctor said, I went into surgery, and I had a rare form of leukemia, APML leukemia, which is a blood cancer. And I had a flesh-eating bacteria at the same time. It was kind of killing me, essentially, and I had no immunity to fight it. So what they did, they took me to surgery, opened me up a bit to relieve the pressure, gave me liters of bloods and antibiotics and to keep me alive. And then my body went into septic shock, so sepsis. Unfortunately, it's where kind of like blood poisoning, where the body shuts down except for your vital organs as a last response to keep you alive. So my heart actually stopped twice. So I went into cardiac arrest a few times. They brought me back to life and managed to get me stable eventually and put me in a induced coma so I could repair and recover. And when I woke up, it was still, they weren't sure if I'd survived the next night or what was going on. I was in a world of hurt. I was on dialysis, had things breathing for me and all that. And luckily, I was young and fit, and that gave me the best chance to get through. And it was a long, long journey in hospital there, about 3 years in total. The first month was just kind of seeing how I would go. And then it got to a point where my limbs had gone gangrenous from lack of oxygen. So a little bit like frostbite. You've people have seen that in movies or in medical photos where your body just turns to stone, almost like a gargoyle, like goes black and rock hard and that. And essentially that was then starting to poison me because that was poisoning my body, which they didn't want to track to kill me. So they waited about a month. They said, yeah, we have to amputate now. So first they took my left hand and most of my right fingers. I don't know why my right finger, this one didn't go, but thank God. Apparently it's a different bloodline or something. But
wow, that's amazing.
Pincergret, which is massive, that I can do anything now with that. But and then 2 weeks later they took both my legs below my knee, and it was a very long journey to get through recovery of surgery because my left leg was really bad, so they actually had to take most of the skin off it and skin graft my whole leg, which they had to take from my stomach and my butt and my right leg, and that didn't heal right away. And in hospital I got all sorts of infections, golden staph and MRSA and all that, which happens when you're sitting there with open wounds in a hospital environment. I was constantly fighting battles with sickness, infection, trying to get my body to heal and accept the new skin, to a point where eventually they puzzled me all together. The grafts healed, I healed up. That was after about 60 operations. And then I got to a point where I was well enough, a few months in, and like, okay, well, now you're well enough for chemotherapy. So I had to deal with the cancer still, obviously. So, then I got poisoned effectively for a few years and was in remission 5 years later. So that was kind of my hospital story. But then as I was coming out of hospital, I looked at myself in the mirror there. I was down to 40 kilos at one stage, just pale white, skin and bone from an 80-kilo athlete, and going, this is not me. I can't identify with this person. So yeah, going through my rehab journey was just building my body back up to being a 19-year-old male, a fit male. And that was slow and steady, but then started to get a bit more momentum, build some muscle, see what this body could do. So then to a point a few years later, I was like, all right, well, I've got a few small goals now. I can sit up by myself, push a wheelchair. I got to the point where I could wear prosthetic legs and teach myself and build my muscles back up to do that. And I was like, there's something missing still in my life, and it's my competitive drive. So I'm a twin, Chris, and that's never left me. I just competed for everything in my life, and there's something missing, and that was sport. And asked the rehab center, like, what can I do now? I don't know, been disabled before. Like, the Paralympics was a blip on the radar back then for mainstream. I'd never really even seen it. And I knew I loved sport, and they said, oh, we're going to hook you up with someone at the AIS, given I was Canberra based. And that was a swim coach who's still coaching now, Yuri. He was great. He said, yeah, basically we'll get you into swimming and you can do that. But mate, I'm more of a land mammal, I like to say. Like, I like to be able to breathe properly when I compete and exercise. And running all day, every day, swimming, not really my jam. But I gave it a crack and got into that kind of semi-elite lifestyle of going to training camps with other swimmers and going to AIS to train and building my body back up a bit. And I guess that was the path that I needed to have, because I think a year later I was doing some weight training in the AIS, and the head coach of wheelchair rugby, Brad, came in and just said g'day, essentially, and mentioned that I'd be eligible to play wheelchair rugby. I was like, what's that? Like, that sounds awesome. And then he invited me to a training camp later that year. The national team was in AIS, and I just came along and watched these guys and girls at the time just smashing into each other and fanging down the court and cutting through these cone weaves. And like, wow, you can do that in a wheelchair? How do you go that fast? And met some of them. They're really nice people. And the coach essentially just said, oh, yeah, jump in a chair. I was like, oh, I don't know how to use this thing. And just go down the end of the court and hit that guy. I was like, no way. He's like 3 times bigger than me, But I did it, hit the guy, he turned around and smiled. And I was like, yeah, this is what I want to do now. So put everything I could that next year to make the squad, and then within 12 months I was going to my first Paralympic Games.
Mate, what a fantastic story of resilience and determination and competitiveness. You mentioned your twin there. Is that where you reckon you got your competitiveness from?
Absolutely, yeah. My whole life, everything, and even still now.
Who's the oldest or youngest?
Me by 2 minutes, mate. Yeah, I'd say I'm more mature, and he'd say he's more developed. So
right, okay,
never win.
Yeah. And then the love, the passion for the sport ignited to make the team and to make the national team. And then the first time that you've been selected for Australia, do you remember that? And how proud you were as an athlete representing your country, the dream of Chris as a young child?
Yeah, it was awesome, mate. My family came over, and I remember vividly, like, it was London Paralympic Games. It was one of the standout Paralympic Games for our movement, and you're pushing out to this massive stadium, hundreds of thousands of people there, all taking photos. It's like a movie, really. You got songs going. You look up, and the Queen's in a little booth waving. It's just, you're like, is this real? I almost died, a few years ago. And it was one of those times where I could actually reflect on my whole journey, like everything I've done, all those rough nights of fighting and pain and everything. You have to draw on your resilience to get through something like that, and then mixed in with that lifelong dream to be representing a country at sport, and being shown on TV, and everyone back home, all your mates that couldn't get to London were there supporting you, and it was just unreal to have that moment, and knowing that mum and dad and all that were in the crowd somewhere, and just felt like my purpose and where I belonged. Like, this is what I always wanted to be. And that's great. But then you got to shut that off the next day and be like, we're here for a job. That's step one. Become a Paralympian. Cool. I've done that now. What's next? Well, let's do the best I can for my team. and add some value, because that's what I'm about. And luckily enough, in that campaign, we'd never won a gold medal before, always come silver. And I think we just found that right formula with me coming into the team, having that different lineup with me and Riley, having some great athletes around us, and just being a bit more professional in this cycle, that we actually went on to win every quarter of every game in that Paralympic Games, to win Australia's first ever gold medal, and probably something that will never happen again in the sport. And it's the start of our dynasty in Australian wheelchair rugby. So I'll always be honoured, proud, and privileged to have set that legacy in motion for Australia.
No, mate, for sure. Absolutely. And that's something, as you mentioned, will probably stand through the test of time of every quarter. Like, I mean, that's pretty unheard of, well, very, very challenging to beat now. The team dynamic then, you being fresh into the sport and into your first Paralympic Games, can you talk about the team dynamic, the culture, and also the legacy that you're leaving now as captain and building that culture moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can pretty honestly say back in 2012 and prior, like Riley Batt, who many people would know is well renowned as the best player in the world, and he was outstanding. Like when I came in, he'd be defending 3 players. Well, it'd take 4 players to defend him at times, and he'd still get the ball, which is awesome. But that's not team sport, and teams work that out, and they could balance their lineups and really take advantage of when Riley didn't have the ball in his hands, that kind of thing. And I think it took just a few more athletes who could carry the weight of the team and sort of be ball carriers and spread that load a bit, to be the difference to how we could actually go and win our first one. And that's something I know I brought in as the captain, is that we're a team. Like, no one player is bigger than this team. And I think a telling sign of probably my leadership coming in was I was captain after our Tokyo campaign, and that campaign was probably our worst campaign that I've ever been a part of. COVID affected, team injuries and illness, which meant we couldn't run our best lineups. It was a struggle on a lot of fronts. Riley was the captain at the time, but he was also the captain of the whole Paralympic team. So he had a lot of weight on his shoulders, from a whole mob perspective of Australia, let alone captaining our team and all the media requirements he needed to do on top of everything and perform. And Riley was a great captain, but I think he came away after that being like, yeah, I think I just want to focus on my game as an athlete and play my own leadership role, and looking for a new leader. And I've been around for a while and had done previous leadership experience in different organizations, etc., and at work, and got selected. And I guess the first thing I wanted to do was be okay with Riley. Like, I'm coming in here, like, you're still here. We need to get this right, and we get along well, but we're highly competitive as well. So I play for Queensland, he's for New South Wales. We're always in the final, giving each other grief, swearing at each other. So I just want to make sure we're okay there. And the next thing I wanted to do was make sure we had the pushing the coaches to make sure we picked our squad and team as soon as possible for our next major, so we could really come together and just bond as a team, as a squad, as a tight unit that no one is getting in or out of. And the next thing I wanted to do was redo our team values and culture, which kind of slipped a little bit. And the first thing I did in that is sit everyone down and actually went through the whole history of our sport and our team from inception. And we had some guys there who had been there in that are coaching staff, etc., been there from earlier periods, and they sort of talked about the strengths, weaknesses, what worked, what didn't, for the Steelers, and we sort of kept those strong parts. And then we had some sessions where we had some chats with our teammates, both in person, online, and some creative stuff in groups, to make sure everyone's voice was heard, because we know not everyone's going to speak up in a group, but that doesn't mean that their voice is not valid, right? So different ways to capture our teammates' priorities and what's important to them and what they feel this group should be. And then we've kind of distilled all that into 4 pillars for our team, which is professional, hardworking, united, and caring. And I think the united and caring pillars were very new, and that was the female athletes, I think, that really led that, which has actually helped us enormously in terms of how we act as a group. And then we've just tried to instill every part of our operations as a squad, as a program, and as athletes, to those core values, and we've put some behaviours underneath them. So we've spent hours and hours, days, working on this team culture values, and we bounced back with that formula, with a bit of a new leadership, got some pickpocketed some players from other sports and built them up and got them built into the Steelers way, and came into the World Championships in 2022 as underdogs. Everyone our coaches wrote us off in the media, and I'm on record saying, no, we have a team here. We can do something. We've got experience. We've got the right people. It's just got to put it together, and we did. We went out and won that World Championships, which was for me my second World Championships win in 10 years apart. Like, I don't know how many athletes can win a World Championships a decade later in a team environment. It's pretty special. And that kind of started our little run into Paris and has helped us. And we still use those values and that culture in our team today.
So important, Chris. And you've stepped up even in this interview about talking about leadership. You're talking about being a leader, being determined, but also knowing your roles within the team. And everyone's got different positions and everyone's got different stories, I suppose, of how they get there and what they want to achieve. Why do you think you're a good leader? What is it about leadership that you think is sort of a bit addictive to you?
For me, it's about humility, I feel. Like, I've known a lot of good leaders in my sport, and the one thing is that they've always been approachable and always been there to listen. So less of a dictatorship, but then they're also happy to have the hard conversations with the team or with the coaches. And much the same in business, in my old workplaces, the CEOs, managers, they were there to not micromanage, but to lift you up, I guess, and give you some belief that you have what it takes. It's just about playing to your strengths, essentially. And in a team environment, that's what it is. We're a team. They're only as good as your weakest player, as we all know. I don't know, me personally. I'm a twin. I'm the eldest in my family, so I guess naturally always kind of been the responsible one, or wanted people have kind of followed me in a way. So I don't know what it is, but in different areas of my life, I've taken on leadership positions, and I enjoy it. I get a lot out of, like, even Paris, I got a lot out of seeing my teammates do well, seeing my teammates hold their medal and hug their families, and that lifts me up as much as my own personal need to be the best in the world. I want our team to be the best in the world. I wanted our athletes and teammates to taste success I've had, because it's infectious, and that's the dream. That's why we do this. I want us to have a collective goal towards that.
Speaking of goals, were you a goal setter during that tough time around? There was always something to get to achieve, or was it sort of decompartmentalised, I suppose, into a step at a time, and thinking about the Paralympic Games in 2028 now as a goal? Is it in the back of your mind, or is it like, no, let's just focus on this next event?
Yeah, absolutely. I set goals in all areas of my life, and I think you have to. And I think what keeps life fresh is that you have your medium and short-term goals, not just the long ones, because that can be a grind sometimes. And even, as I said before, like being in a hospital setting, I had to set very small goals, like sit up, feed myself, brush my teeth, like go to the toilet by yourself, and just incrementally build that up. And it's no real different in sport. It's tricky because in the national team, we train every day to be Australian Steeler, but we've got 3 international tournaments for this year. You're training a lot with not much competition and payoff. We've got our domestic season, etc. But I guess my goal is to always want to be learning and improving in my sport. That's probably why I'm still here 14 years later playing this sport, because I genuinely love it. And there's so many variables in our sport on the court, let alone who you're playing with, that you can never stop learning in our sport, essentially, and trying to master your craft in different areas of the game. So my goal is just to be the best athlete in my classification for my team, but also the best leader I can be. And I don't think I've reached my goal of being the best athlete in my class in the world. And it's hard when you got the best in your team and sit next to you. But I guess I've shifted my angle a bit more of like be the best teammate I can in the world. So those that watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, so I'm like the Scottie Pippen of my team. I'm lifting Riley up. I'm in there to push him to be best he can be and make sure that I pull my weight and put him in good positions and make his job easier and my other athletes and teammates as well. So I've kind of internally taken on that role. And I can always do better at that. But then also when I get the chance to be the number one on court, keep learning and growing on that.
That subtle shift of mindset change for you, how much of a difference has that made?
Yeah, it's made all the difference, I think. It's that high performance mindset, that growth mindset is what you need to have to be an athlete, let alone be the best in the world. So that's what we try and instill in our new athletes coming through, which is tough. I'm 40 next year, Chris, and I've got athletes.
It's the best decade, mate. Trust me. I'm 43.
I love
it's been
being
so
an
much
80s
fun.
baby, but as an athlete, I'm a grandpa, mate, and I've got Gen Z kids coming through.
Faster, yeah, yep.
Rooming with
Stronger.
19-year-olds and trying to communicate in
the Instagram generation.
different ways.
Yeah.
Like it's just the things that got me up and wanting to be the best is different to this generation. So again, that keeps me on my toes, always learning. And yeah, I love growth and I love the challenge.
Speaking of growth and learning outside of the game of wheelchair rugby, do you switch off sometimes and do you growth and learning in your own life as well?
When I can, I've got 2 kids under 6, so switch off
Peppa Pig.
when they're not around. They're a challenge, mate. But again, they help me grow as a leader too, because I'm their father. So there's parenting and leadership go hand in hand. I think management of people and
Sure does.
instilling values and behaviors. So yeah, I'm always on my toes with them. I do get, so I live in the Sunshine Coast. So when I get time to myself with my partner, we've got the hinterland up here, so beautiful rainforests and Airbnbs up there, and we've got the beach. We can go for a sand day or whatever, and then Brisbane's not too far if you want to get in the city. So I've got basically everything you need up here for my downtime, and I definitely take time to do that.
Chris, I've asked on my previous podcasts about the scoreboard moment, the moment in your life which sort of changed trajectory, the moment that you think that potentially that shaped your career, or not even just your career, but yourself. You want to talk about what that scoreboard moment would be for you?
Absolutely. I think, and it's not going to surprise anyone, I think it is acquiring my disability and sort of sitting there in that room saying, all right, I can sit down and cry about this, or I can think I've got now forced time to think about what I want to do in my life, what's my purpose and what I want to achieve. And all I kept coming back to was I've loved sport. I've always wanted to represent my country in sport. And now I've got an opportunity. It's not the door, it's the window. It's a little bit different, but I'm going to throw everything I can into trying to make that dream a reality in every single day of my rehab, every single day learning the sport and fast tracking myself to be in a position to be picked and make that dream come true.
What a fantastic moment. Chris, the future of wheelchair rugby, do you want to talk about where you want to see it?
Absolutely. I mean, the game is shifting. We're trying to get more females into the sport. I think from a very high level, like the IPC level, they're wanting to see all their sports have equity in gender, so male and female athletes, same numbers going to Paralympic Games in the future. So at the moment, our sport's in a bit of a crossroads. Like, do we stay as a mixed sport and try and build more females in that? Or do we kind of separate and have a male and a female league? So the future of our sport is exciting. The Australian government is investing a lot of money into parasport at the moment, and in particular into wheelchair rugby. We've got officers propping up across Australia. We've got new staff members who are in control of developing the next generation and giving them opportunities and training programs and extended squads and bits and pieces like that. So it's the best time really ever. So if you're an athlete or you're just a person with a disability who's interested in becoming an athlete, and a story similar to mine, the world's at your feet. There's way more resources than when I started, and there's way more defined pathways to get there. And I love our sport. It's so exciting now. Like on the international stage, Paralympic stage, every games I've been to, like, this is the highest quality of our sport's ever been. It just somehow keeps trumping itself every 4 years, so every 2 years of a major. So as a spectator, I'm just loving watching our sport, and it be played at such a high level, because to me, that's what I've always wanted to do, play it in the highest level of the biggest games and tournaments of my sport.
And when Chris finally decides not to play wheelchair rugby anymore, what do you think the general public or people would want to remember you by?
Hopefully just someone who worked their ass off, was very purposeful in what they did, team first, and gave everything they could on the court at all times. And for me, that's what I want my legacy to be. And in particular for my kids, like when they're old enough to actually truly understand what I do as an athlete and what I've achieved in my time, and they can watch footage and see, oh, Dad never gave up on a play. He gave everything he can for his team. And hopefully they take some of that into their own life and whatever they want to do.
And you're in the I wouldn't say the peak of your career, but certainly as leader now, you've got an avenue ahead, which you said there's more Chris Bond to give towards the game. After the game, have you thought about what's next, or is it at the moment just focus?
Yeah, I'm in a bit of a transition period at the moment where I'm sort of weighing up what I want to do. I wasn't sure if I was going to continue on after Paris, and I have told the coaches, like, I'll go this year, but putting some feelers out for some full-time work, and somebody's got to pay the bills as well, unfortunately. That's the battle, I guess.
Sport, business, life,
athlete.
yeah, so, all the domains.
I'm just in a bit of a transition, but I'm not sure. I might retire before LA. I want to keep going. Not exactly sure yet. I'm working that out at the moment, but I do love the sport. I'm coaching and captaining my league team. We play next week in Melbourne, so I still get that outlet of being involved in the high performance aspect as well as being an athlete. So not sure, mate, but we'll know in time.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. Sometimes I'm a little bit confused about what I want to do as well. So but I love being behind the mic. Chris, thank you so much for telling your story today. Obviously one that has come from a very tragic accident, come out the other side, to be where you are now, to leave or to leave the hospital firstly, to then to play sport, and then to play wheelchair rugby, to then play for Australia, to be in the Paralympics that you've been in, now to captain and to leave a legacy. Congratulations, and it's just an inspiration to everyone. I look forward to following your progress and the team's progress as well, as you mentioned, a team game, and looking forward to being an advocate for wheelchair rugby in Australia.
Thanks, mate. I appreciate it. And all your listeners, if you haven't already, go and look up wheelchair rugby and give it a look.